Well, g'day and welcome back to another one. This one is about Super Rugby. We have finally made it to the finals, and you could argue we finally have the best teams left. Well, I don't know about that. This top 8 system, I don't think it's perfect. Anyway, we've got 4 good teams and then 4 teams that are probably going to get kicked out or knocked out in the first week of finals. Maybe they need to re-look at this top 8 scenario, but whatever, we are where we are. I guess it was reasonably exciting to see a few teams sort of compete for those last few spots in the top 8. But anyway, here we are. We've got 4 pretty good games in front of us. But let's have a quick look at the games from last weekend. Bear with me. But it was a pretty good last final round of Super Rugby. We had Crusaders with the first game of the round winning 43-10 against Moana Pacifica. That was a pretty predictable result, I must admit, and you could argue that the Crusaders have definitely found a bit of form. They've gotten a few players back like Cody Taylor, Ethan Blackadder, Fergus Burke. They've got a proper 5'8" really at Super Rugby level. So anyway, not too much worth talking about really in the sense of this game. Moana Pacifica scored a penalty and a converted try in the first half, so their scoring was finished by the 30th minute, and the Crusaders went on with it. I think the Crusaders scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tries, 4 in the first half, winning pretty comfortably, and you could tell that they knew the Crusaders, that was for them, that was going to be their last game. They had to win this game to have a chance of getting a top 8 spot. They won that game. They got into the top 8 because it was the first game of the round, and then we will find out what happens in a couple of games later. Waratahs Reds. I must admit this was a slightly more fascinating game. The Reds had a flyer of a first half, certainly a first 20 or so minutes, scoring 3 tries. And then there was nothing after that in terms of the first half scoring. The Reds looked ominous and around that 20th minute mark, scoring 2 tries back to back pretty quickly, and I thought that game was going to be all over. I had actually thought the Waratahs would keep this one nice and close, but certainly in the first half I thought this game is over. Anyway, so in the second half, it was a lot more closer. The Waratahs managed to score the first try straight after half-time, or a few minutes into half-time, and then the Reds did respond to that. But the Waratahs managed to score a couple of tries in around the halfway through this second half, and the Reds didn't look like scoring. The Waratahs scored another try with about 8 or 9 minutes to go through Dylan Peach, and they didn't take the lead, but they got to within 1 point No, they did take the lead. That's right. But Liner managed to kick a penalty with a few minutes to go. The Waratahs was still in it, only 1 point behind, and missed a penalty, which I felt was reasonably kickable. I would have loved to have the Waratahs win that game. I had taken a bit of a punt and tipped them to win that. But anyway, good close game. Probably one of the better games for the Waratahs this season. However, that first 20 minutes was absolutely appalling, but they did well to recover from that. So that was the Friday night games, and then Saturday was the first game. It was Fiji and Drua against the Rebels. Now, the Rebels had locked in a place in the top 8, but Fiji had to win in order to make it through to the top 8 because the Crusaders had passed them. And of course, the Force was close behind as well. But anyway, Fiji, this game was quite interesting because at halftime it was 19 all, so it was pretty close. Frank Lamani got yellow card in the 12th minute. I don't think he's played, but he might have played 1 or 2 games since he got red carded against the Rebels in Melbourne. And I think he had a 6-week ban. But so another yellow card, and there was another potential high tackle, but there was nothing Lamani could do about it. But certainly a volatile character, shall we say. But anyway, can't stay out of trouble. But yeah, 19 all at half time. But after half time and that first 10 minutes or 10 to 12 minutes of half time, it was all Fijian draw. They scored three pretty quick tries, and that just absolutely knocked the wind out of the Rebel sail. And that was it. That was all she wrote. There was a missed penalty late to Fiji and Drua, but yeah, score ended up 40-19. So Fiji and Drua cementing their spot in the top 8. They couldn't be touched at that point. The Hurricanes played the Highlanders, which was a all New Zealand derby. The Highlanders did put together a pretty good team there and had a pretty good crack at that. Crack at this game. They had received a couple of yellow cards, so that never helps. But yeah, she was all. Although the Highlanders scored the first try, but it was all really Hurricanes after that. Boy, the Hurricanes, they are just incredibly solid. Lots of depth. I won't get into too much detail at this point, but they won pretty comfortably, 41-14. Pretty low-key second half. Halftime score was 29-14. The Highlanders did not add to that score in the second half. Hurricanes scoring a couple of tries to win quite comfortably, but reasonably quiet on the scoring front in the second half, as I guess they both teams were starting to look forward to the quarterfinals. And then the other Kiwi Derby, we had the Blues versus Chiefs at Eden Park. I managed to get along to that game, and as a Chiefs fan, I wasn't too impressed or too happy about the result, or to be fair, the Chiefs' performance. What I would say is the Chiefs certainly have an issue, or one of their biggest challenges is discipline. But without going too much into the refereeing, with Ben O'Keefe, he's not a Chiefs fan. Let's put it that way. He is not. He does not like that team. Certainly, a good example of that was the final last year. Sam Cane got on the wrong side of him, but I don't think he's forgiven the Chiefs for that. So anyway, the Chiefs got hammered. I think, to be fair though, the Blues were dominant in most of the set piece, certainly at the scrum, something that the Chiefs need to turn around really quickly. They've got an opportunity to do that this week, but against the Kiwi teams, they've definitely struggled. There's no doubt that the Chiefs have the personnel to do that, but I think that they're struggling for a bit of form at the moment. Anyway, the Blues winning reasonably comfortably. The Chiefs managed to score 2 late tries, missed a couple of the conversions for those tries, but scored 2 late tries to actually restrict the Blues to second place on the table. So the Blues wouldn't have been too happy about that. However, it was the Chiefs couldn't win and upset the Blues, but certainly they upset the Blues in that way, which they would have been pretty happy about. I certainly was. Although it didn't really matter in the sense, certainly this week in finals, it doesn't matter a whole lot. You'd imagine the Hurricanes and Blues both got home games. They should win those comfortably. It comes down to that final, probably. If it's Blues versus Hurricanes in the final, the Blues won't be at Eden Park. Anyway, for the last game of the round was, last game of the regular season, home and away season, was Force versus Brumbies over in Perth. The Force losing 19-24, Brumbies continuing their winning ways, and a class side this year. Look, the Brumbies had the better start. They scored 2 tries in the first 12 minutes, got a yellow card. That gave the Force a chance to score, which they did. Lolosio did manage to score a penalty at the end, so the score at halftime was 7-17. The Brumbies scored in the first and the second half, about 12 minutes into it, and the Force didn't manage to score right up until sort of the last couple of minutes of the game, where a bit of a hectic finish to the game, but they managed to score 2 tries there right at the very end. And 1 try being an extra time, but the Brumbies hanging on to win that 24-19 and retain third spot on the table. So that was the recap for the final round, or last weekend anyway. So let's now move on to the quarterfinals, where we've got got our top 8 locked in, and we know who's playing who, because up until last weekend we didn't know who was going to be playing who. So let's just, before we look at the quarterfinals, let's look at the teams that didn't make it. Waratahs finished dead last, with only 2 wins to speak of. And unbelievably, I think they were both against the Crusaders. So yeah, only 2 wins for the season. One of the best, a team that should be consistently the best team in Australia. They have the biggest player pool and probably the most finances, but they've definitely got some issues within their environment or whatever. I don't know, but they just can't. They can't put a good campaign together. Moana Pacifica had 4 wins for the year. I think that was probably slightly better than past for them. That's certainly the best performance they've had in the competition. And if you, I think I said this last week, but if you had asked Tana Umaga at the beginning of the season what they would like to, or how many wins they'd like to get from the season, and I think he would have taken 4 at that point. I don't know. You always set high targets, but they should be relatively happy with that and perform well. In some games they didn't win. The Force were third from the bottom. They had 4 wins also, but they didn't do as well as the Rebels. And the Rebels, what I would argue, had a bit more to play for, because it was pretty clear at the beginning of the season that the Rebels were going to struggle to stay in the competition beyond the season, which we found out a few nights ago that they are no longer, well, they won't be in the competition for next year. But worth noting that the Rebels had a better performance this year. They're still going, they're still in the competition, whereas the Force, I would say they underperformed. The other reason I say that they underperformed is because they actually had quite a reasonable squad this year. They certainly had a few New Zealanders. I think there was one game in particular where I counted 6 or 7 in the starting lineup in the 15. So in the squad they had quite a few New Zealanders. They had Kurtley Beale, they had Nick White, Ben Donaldson, or Wallabies or ex-Wallabies, but also they had Isaac Ryder and Sam Carter in locking positions. They might have had a few injuries, but look, I think they had quite certainly a number of players that would justify a better result than 4 wins from the season. So I would suspect they'll be slightly disappointed. Anyway, the Crusaders, the biggest disappointment of the year, reigning champions with only 4 wins. They had losses to the Waratahs, like I said, twice, unbelievably, which means that the Waratahs beat the Crusaders in Canterbury or in Christchurch. They had losses to the Drua, Force and Highlanders. But even with injuries, I think that the reigning champs, they'll be exceptionally disappointed. They are a much better franchise, or better team, better club. And, I know they had a lot of injuries, but they should have won a few games. There's quite a few games, probably 5, where they lost by 3 to 5 points. So that is sort of the wash-up of the few teams that have already been knocked out. Now we're into the quarterfinals. I would say that they're all very one-sided, certainly based on odds, but as you look at them, I think a couple might be a little bit closer, but certainly based on odds, the TAB is not giving the away teams any chance. So the first game up on Friday night is the Chiefs versus the Reds. The last time the Chiefs played the Reds won that 25-19. I think that was in Queensland. Likely to be the closest game of the quarterfinals. The Reds coming off a close win against the Waratahs. I would argue that, like I just said in my recap, that the Waratahs should have won that, but then the week before that the Reds had a good win against the Force, winning by about 50 points. The Chiefs are coming off 2 losses to Kiwi teams, and of course the 3 games ago was a close shave against the Rebels over in Melbourne, only just winning that one. That was the last home game for the Rebels. But you look at that and you look at the last 2 games and you would say that the Chiefs are really struggling for form. It's not the best preparation to come into finals, and I would also say that the forwards really need to step up. That seems to be the biggest challenge for the Chiefs at the moment. and an area of concern. So they'll be looking to address that, and I think they have with some of the personnel changes. But I think that this week should provide a small opportunity to be able to, try and get some momentum, get some confidence. So anyway, in terms of the Chiefs lineup, they've made 6 changes. Takiaho, Samasoni Takiaho gets the start at hooker, which was it was just pretty obvious. Bradley Sader will go back to the bench. Tupu Vai will return to lock, which is a no-brainer. And then in the backs, there was probably more changes. So the forwards that have been selected need to improve on what they did last week. Takiaho will help with that. But anyway, Sean Stevenson and Imoni Narawa will get the start. They return to the back line. Sean Stevenson's absolutely key. He's been in and out this year. Hasn't had much game time, but he is a very, very good attacking threat, and I think that's where the Chiefs need to. Of course, they've got to set the foundation in the forwards and then the set piece, but I think where the Chiefs really get their confidence is their attacking ability. So Sean Stevenson is absolutely key to that. His combination with Damian McKenzie is pivotal there. So hopefully Sean Stevenson can play a bit better than I think his last outing, because I don't think he had one of his strongest games. But of course he's coming back from injury, to be fair to him. And Narawa has had a pretty good year, so I'm pretty keen to see him have a good crack. So Nanai Satoro will go to the left wing. I think that's the best back three that the Chiefs can have. And then Anton Leonard-Brown will return. I will just work out where he'll return. But Ramaka Pohepi will stay and keep his position, whereas I think Quinton Tupaia should be starting. However, it is what it is. I think that is still pretty solid there. And of course, Damian McKenzie is a key man. So let's just have a double check of where I've got that. Yeah, so Anton Leonard-Brown's outside centre or 13 or centre. And then we've got Quinton Tupaia on the bench there. So he can come off, provide some good impact, as he did against the Blues on the weekend. But I would be starting with him, and that would be the best lineup in the back line. So I'm pretty happy with that. In terms of the forwards, we've covered most of that. But Aidan Ross at prop. He's key man, and then I do like the back row with Luke Jacobson, Satiti and Finau. However, they probably got dominated, it's fair to say, against the Blues, but they'll be looking to step up. That was their first game, I think, as a combination. So that is the Chiefs side, and then in terms of the Reds, they've made a few tweaks there with Tom Liner getting the start at first 5. I don't mind that. I think they've got a bit of a luxury there with a couple of good fly halves at the moment, but I don't mind Liner. I probably would go that way myself. In terms of the pack, they've made a few changes there. So from the bench, you've got. From the bench last week, you've got number 8 John Bryant, you've got lock Ryan Smith, and former All Blacks prop Jeffrey Tu'umaga Allen. They've been reinstated to the starting lineup, which I think is a sound move. Tu'umaga Allen will be relishing the opportunity to go up against the Chiefs. But yeah, look, if we were to if you wanted to know what I think's going to happen, I think the Chiefs will win comfortably. I've got them 13 plus here. They'll want a bit of revenge, shall we say, against the Reds, because the Reds upset them last time, and then what I'd also argue is the Chiefs are at home. The Chiefs they'll be looking to bounce back from a couple of average performances to their standards, but certainly they will want to bounce back from a couple of losses. For me, I think the Chiefs need to really build in this game. They need to build into next week. Got to make sure you win, but they need to build into next week and get some confidence, certainly in attack and at set piece. So yeah, Chiefs 13 plus. The next game is the Hurricanes versus Rebels down in Wellington. Is this gonna be the last game ever for the Rebels? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, you have to go back 7 games since the Rebels last won. So the Rebels had 5 wins this year. They had, and for the first 9 games, they actually had 5 wins in 9 games. So they had a much better start to the season. And then the last time they played each other, the Hurricanes won that 54-28 pretty comfortably. For mine, the Hurricanes are the best team this year so far. Got a few finals to go, but I know they've lost a couple of games. But anyway, I think the Hurricanes lost to the Brumbies in Canberra and to the Blues just recently, but they could easily have won that game. So that game was at Eden Park. Very good preparation for the Hurricanes as well. They've been able to rest some players, get a bit of rotation. They've got better depth, arguably, than anyone, certainly I think in the forward pack and their back row, but they haven't had their depth was heavily tested in the hooker position in particular. So they've had a few players return from injury, so they're looking pretty fresh, I would say, and they've had some good challenging tight contests against New Zealand teams. And this one. They should win pretty comfortably, so it's only going to help their cause for the semi-finals. So anyway, I've easily got the Hurricanes to win this at 13+. Let's have a quick look at the teams. I don't think there's much of a competition here, so I'll just skim over that. But I think it'll be the last game for the Rebels. Anyway, in terms of the Hurricanes, Clark Laidlaw has coached exceptionally. Why don't we just take a moment there to recognise that coming from the New Zealand Sevens team into Super Rugby is not normal or typical, but I think he's made some solid improvements with the Hurricanes. It's pretty obvious based on their performances. So largely unchanged there. Asafa Omoa is obviously key. It's good to have him back. So the type 5 is basically the same. One change in the loosies, Peter Lakai comes in for Duplessis Karifi. I think I haven't been too surprised. I mean, what a luxury to have Duplessis Karifi on the bench. But Peter Lakai has been one of the best players in the competition, so there's no real surprise there. But otherwise, unchanged after that. So, pretty solid. The Hurricanes will be enjoying now getting some consistency with their lineup after being able to rest and chop and change a little bit. In terms of the Rebels, just a few changes. Obviously they got beat reasonably convincingly against Fiji and Drua last week. 4-pack remains unchanged, and of course Carter Gordon comes back. He was a late withdrawal against Fiji anyway. Andrew Callaway shifts to fullback. He was playing on the wing against Fiji and Drua, so for me that makes a lot of sense. Lucky Anderson will come into the right wing there. So not too much changes there either in both lineups. Pretty straightforward tip there. In terms of the other two games, let's keep moving. We've got Blues versus Drua. It came down to the very last minute of that Blues versus Chiefs game before we knew who the Blues were going to be playing. But anyway, I think the Drua will be relatively happy with that. They'll have a good fan base based in Auckland, although I think there's a solid Fijian community in Wellington as well. But anyway, the last time the Blues played the Drua was back at the first game of the season in late February. The Blues winning that one 34-10. Drua yet to win away from home. I don't think that's going to change. That has been their challenge this year. They've won all bar one of their home games this year. The Fiji and Drua had to win against the Rebels to even make the top 8. So that emotional, challenge will have played a part too. The Blues narrowly missing out on top spot, as I said. The Blues lost to the Crusaders 2 weeks ago, and so they only lost 2 games this year. But that game against the Crusaders came down to the wire. The Blues had a chance to win that game, and it was down in Christchurch against a relatively good Crusaders team. They had a few players back from injury, but certainly a fired up Crusaders team. So to narrowly lose in that game, I think says a lot. Actually says a lot about the Blues this year. Anyway, And then the only other game that the Blues have lost was against the Hurricanes in Wellington, but the Blues obviously beat the Hurricanes in Auckland, so one each there. I've got, and the Blues have just been solid and consistent all year, one of the teams to beat. So Blues 13 plus, pretty comfortable there. Should we have a quick look at the teams? Hardly worth looking at the teams when you know the result's going to be so one-sided. Anyway, my phone is not playing ball. Here we go. Finally. So the Blues, Vern Cotter, again, one of the coaches of the year. He's been awesome for the Blues. Added some resolve to a pretty solid, they've got a lot of depth, as you could appreciate, but certainly he's added a bit of starch to that forward pack and to that team. But anyway, just two changes since last week. Josh Beer will come in at lock for Sam Derry. So that's the only change to the pack. And Harry Plummer will move into first five for Stephen Perifetta. Okay, so Stephen Perifetta will go to fullback, which I actually don't mind. I think with the way that Harry Plummer's been playing this year, I mean, at the start of the year, you would have had Stephen Perifetta starting first five, without a doubt. That injury changed things up. The injury to Stephen Perifetta changed things up, which meant Harry Plummer got a chance to play at first five and has performed admirably there, and probably better than that. So, look, I think you've got to have them both on the field. You could have had Harry Plummer at second 5/8 because he has played there quite a bit, but I think with the way that the team dynamic is set up, I think that fullback spot, you've got a better set of players, whether positions whatever, you've got your better players on the field. So Rieko Ioane is back at centre, which was going to be obvious if he was fit. And AJ Lamb will just slide into one position into second five. So, yeah, look, I feel like that's the best back line for the Blues. In terms of Fiji and Drua, same 23, no changes there. So, yeah, look, I like the Blues line up there. They will be wanting to solidify some of their selections and get a bit of consistency there, certainly with Perifetta only coming back in the last couple of games. They'll want him to spend a bit more time on the field. But yeah, look, it's a very, very solid forward pack, isn't it? Kurt Eklund and Ricky Riccatelli. Take your pick. They're both pretty solid at hooker, and it just Patrick Tuipulotu as captain. The back row, Dalton Papali'i, I think, was the biggest omission a few weeks ago against the Crusaders. For me, that was noticeable. And Finlay Christie's, got to be first pick halfback. Hell of a good team. So last quarterfinal, we've got the Brumbies Highlanders. I did say that the Chiefs Reds could be the closest quarterfinal. However, this one shapes up to be depends. The Highlanders are going to be pretty pumped up for it. But anyway, look, the Brumbies are the real deal this year. There was always question marks when they started playing against the Kiwi teams, but they have performed pretty well against the New Zealand teams. The big question is, can they spoil the New Zealand Super Rugby party this year? Finishing third doesn't help. They're not going to get a home final. Well, it's not likely they'll get a home final. Or can the Highlanders make it, 4 New Zealand teams in the semis? So that would be interesting if they could cause an upset. It's a bit of a mixed year for the Highlanders. They've won 6 games, losing 8. They've had big losses against the Blues and Hurricanes, but in the last 4 games, but they had 2 good ones against the Crusaders, who were up for that game, by the way. That Southern Derby is always a good one, and of course beating Fiji and Drua. So that was the last 4 results for them. The last meeting, Brumbies against Highlanders, Brumbies winning 27-21. That was in Dunedin. The weather and whatever. Going to Canberra, a pretty miserable place. Well, the Highlanders will be pretty comfortable there, so I don't think that's an advantage in terms of weather for the Brumbies, but certainly home ground advantage is big for them. Brumbies currently 6 wins in a row. Their last loss was a thumping against the Blues, 46-7 at Eden Park. Hell of a game, that one. It was an anomaly, and the Brumbies bounced straight back, but yeah, they just couldn't do anything that night. I haven't seen, the Brumbies couldn't do anything right, and the Blues were just sort of perfect. So anyway, But yeah, in terms of Brumbies results against New Zealand teams, they are slightly ahead, 3 wins this year against 2 losses. Hurricanes, Blues, Brumbies, all with 12 wins, and I think the Brumbies will add to that this weekend, so I've got them 13 plus. But yeah, I think it's just worth noting that they've only lost 2 games this year. Like I said, they are the real deal. There is no doubt about that. So let's quickly look at the teams before we wrap up. The Brumbies have only made a few changes and a few positional tweaks, but Harry Vella will start at loosehead prop. Tom Hooper will go from the blindside flank to lock, and then there's a rejigged loose forward trio, but Rob Valentini moves to the blind side, and Jerome Brown comes in for Rory Scott on the open side. Charlie Cale is back at number 8. No changes to the back line. And then in terms of the Highlanders, 8 changes, which suggests that they didn't throw everything at the Hurricanes on the weekend. But anyway, Mitch Dunshea will come in at lock. Oliver Haig and Sean Withy are the new flankers. Billy Harmon will go to number 8. I believe Billy Harmon won't be there next year. It sounds like he signed a deal in Japan. And then in the backs, Fakatava and Cameron Miller, they reform their combination in the halves. And then Tanialu Tilia comes in at centre. Tavanawai is back on the right wing in place of Connor Garden-Bishop. Yeah, that's a no-brainer there. But and Jacob Ratumatavuki Neepkins is back at full-back, and not last week against the Highlanders, but the week before against the Fijian Drua, their outside the outside backs for the Highlanders were absolutely on fire, so they'll be looking to replicate that. Jonah Nareki coming back into form as well. So reasonably solid lineup there for the Highlanders. I think that all going well, they will put up a good challenge to the Brumbies, but based on the season that we have just seen and witnessed, you would argue that the Brumbies should do it comfortably. I will say, I did say before, so Brumbies 13 plus. Anyway, thank you so much if you did listen to this. I hope you had enjoyed it. It's going to be good to finally get to the finals. I hope there's an upset or two, not with the Chiefs, but definitely enjoy that, and we'll get into the real stuff next week with the top 4. Enjoy. Thanks.